talked about adding the moon to those shots. The funny part about that is that when the first day I came to Destin, I got here at night and I was driving around like an idiot. I checked into the hotel and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the beach. It's the middle of the night. I'm going to go to the beach. Well, if you've never been to Destin before and you're driving up and down 98, you don't see no beach. You see a lot of tall buildings, but you see no freaking beach. So I kept driving down 98. I went over the bridge in Okaloosa Island. I didn't realize that I was on an island, but all I could see was pitch dark. I still didn't see no beach. So I'm driving back. I turned around, driving back, and right before I came to the bridge, I see the Emerald Brand, and I realize that there's a little, driveway that goes down right across from the Emerald Brand. You guys probably all know exactly what I'm talking about. So that night, I drive down that thing, and there was a security guy. I guess he was an Air Force security guy or something. I said, hey, is it cool if I photograph here? He said, yeah. And, I had my camera and tripod and all. And I was a hobbyist, so I set it all up and did a long exposure shot of the Emerald Brand. It was impressive. The water was all silky and everything in my long exposure. Well, I got home and I remembered Scott Kelby and I remembered the moon from those postcards and all. So I took a full moon, I Googled full moon, got a black and white picture, put that bad boy in the shot and thought, wow, that's cool, printed it. A couple days later, I take the print to work because I'm going to hang it in my office, The owner comes in and goes, man, that's cool. I've never seen anything like that. How much you want for it? I'm like, I don't know, that's 25 bucks. She's like, gives me 25 bucks. One of my very first print sales was from this composite. A composite is a combination of any two pictures. Now you'll see the moon right here. And that's how cameras work. I got a nice couple in focus. This is one of my go-to poses that I stole from Mary. And what I do when I'm out on the beach and I see this situation, and it's actually kind of funny, I tell the bride and groom, wow, I got to get a shot with that moon in the background. And they're all, yeah, let's do that. So then I take a shot like this with a white blur in the background, a white dot. And then I take and get rid of the white dot. And you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and do it to show you how it's done. Not that it's all that difficult. But you can take any of your cloning tools and get the white dot. Actually, you can't do it on a background layer, so you've got to unlock it. Now I've gotten rid of the moon. So then I go on to Google and say, what was the phase of the moon on September 24th? And Google says, a waxing gloobious, whatever the hell that is. So then I do a Google search for a waxing gloobious, and I find one, and then I place it into the photo. And there's the waxing gloobious. So of course then you just resize it down about where you want it. I think I like this guy a little rounder, maybe a little smaller. Spin it around some. Put him where I think it would look good in the composition. Because luckily the couple had their back to the moon, so they don't know. Change my blend mode. Anybody know what blend mode I would use? Change my blend mode to screen. Get rid of all the dark. And there I got my couple with their waxing gloobious. Now the problem, of course, is that the blend mode didn't get rid of all of it. So then I would put a mask on it. And actually, let me, this must have been before the last time I saw Mr. Haddad, because I got a little sensor spot right there. But then using a black brush, and the shortcut for your brush is B for brush. And I'm at 90% opacity and 100% flow in black, so then I just take out a little bit of an edge, And of course, you know, if you want to, you can sharpen it and all kinds of stuff. This is the one I did earlier today when I was setting this up, and what I did was use a curves adjustment on it just to give it a little bit more detail. You can see there. Now, do you guys know about clipping masks? A clipping mask takes the effect that you're working with and clips it or restricts it to the layer below it. To do a clipping mask and to know you're using one, see this little arrow right here? That arrow tells you that layer is clipped to the one below it. So I'm going to unclip it. Okay, so now the curves adjustment, you see that the bride and groom have got a little bit more contrasty. The curves adjustment is affecting the whole composite. Using the clipping mask, there's two ways to do it. You take your pointer and put it right in between the two layers, the one that's the effect and the one you want to clip it to. Hold down your Alt key. See how that changed into an arrow pointing downwards? When you click, you've now clipped it. You can see that the bride's face has gone back to normal. The moon stayed the same. In other words, that curves adjustment only applies to the moon. That's the way. Yes?
How did you create a clipping mask?
Again, I chose, you know, you've got to have the item that you want to have affected by the adjustment directly below the adjustment. You put your pointer right in between the two, hold down the Alt key, you see how the cursor changed, and when you click, oops, there you go, you get the clipping mask. That's the old-fashioned way to do it. The new way to do it, which I don't know what version of Photoshop this came out in, but 99%, matter of fact, I think all, but I haven't found one that doesn't have it yet, of your adjustments have the clipping mask option right here. So when you...
Where? I'm sorry.
Yeah, see that curves? That's the curves property box. There's a clipping mask box right here. When you hit it, and again, if you look at the original layer,
So you have your layer that your object that you're adjusting, and then you have a layer above that,
which is the actual adjustment layer.
which is the actual adjustment.
Mhm.
Okay, so your moon was below it. The next layer was the
Curves.
Okay, curves. That's right. So then, while on the curves layer, you hit that clipping mask.
Yep.
Okay.
And like I said, for some reason, if the adjustment doesn't have it, or you're using an older version of Photoshop, all you got to do is put your cursor right in between the two. And by the way, this is how you unclip. Hold the Option key down, or the Alt key down, and click again. You see I unclipped it, and I clipped it, unclipped it, clipped it. And that works with hue saturation, with levels, all of that stuff. And again, that technique is a tool that you will use a lot in compositing, especially something like, filters. Warming. Like a lot of times, one object will be too warm and I'm trying to composite into something that's a little cooler. Well, I'll do a warming filter, like this guy here, the little camera guy. You can see now the whole scene is warmed. Well, I hit the clipping mask and only the moon has been warmed. I wouldn't do it in this scenario because the moon isn't warm, but you can imagine that, again, when you're doing a composite, the white balance is going to be different in all the different objects that you're using, and that's one technique of warming up one object or cooling it. You can use, that same photo filter and go to a cooling filter rather than, a warming filter to help equalize the picture. So, bottom line is, you get a picture that you want to add the moon to, and cut out the moon. Make sure you've got a black background. Drop it on there. Hit your blend mode. Go to screen, and all of a sudden you've got the moon and the moon only. If you need to trim it a little bit, add a layer mask to it, and then just paint out whatever excess that you don't want out with your layer mask. See, you can go home and do that. And now you've created your first composite. 2 pictures, right? 2 pictures combined to make one. Let's see what else we got. Okay, I'm going to show this one. This is a little bit more of an advanced technique, but you know, it's getting to where it's kind of a commonplace technique. And basically, what you've got is a woman with blonde hair against a black background. Now, it's tougher, but there is a way to do this with someone that has dark hair if they're against a light background. I talk about it some in your little handout, but when you look at Photoshop, you know, I look at it as a toolbox. There are a zillion different tools in that box. I don't know how to use them all. I know how to use the ones that pertain to what I do, but things like 3D and typography, I knew my way around it, but I'm a little lost. This kind of stuff, picture, you know, touching up photography stuff, I know because I do it all the time. And when you're trying to achieve a goal, whether that's a, you know, a composite or a blending of colors or whatever, you've got to, you know, you got to know that there's 10 or 12 different ways to do it. With experience, you'll know which is the best way to do it is by looking at a picture. Without experience, you'll do what we all do. You'll, you know, experiment until you figure it out. But knowing that that tool is available to you is the battle. You know, that's the hard part.
Now, was this background already black?
Yes, this is a stock picture I downloaded off Google, and I just ran blonde against a dark background, and that's what I got. I'm going to give you a composite that doesn't make any sense because I don't really care if it does or not. All I want to do is show you this technique. So I'm going to get rid of the blonde, my little photo filter, and I got a picture of New York, and it's a relatively dark picture. So I want to put the blonde in there, but as you can see from her picture, cutting out her hair, you know, I don't ever like to say that anything, get these new glasses by the way, so I'm about to have blind. I don't like to say that anything's impossible in Photoshop, because there's people that just amaze me. But it would be damn near impossible to cut out her hair, especially the part directly over her hand, because they're basically thin strands. Now, of course, this is an extreme example, and it's meant to be. But basically, come on. You're supposed to hit Control 1 and center or Control 0 and center the picture in the frame. And of course, like always, Photoshop doesn't want to work when I'm showing off. You can navigate your way around in the window, by the way, by holding down your space bar, and that gives you your hand tool. Your hand tool allows you to move your picture around and all that. So anyway, here we got the blonde looking at her split end standing on the street in New York, and you want to make it look right. So this is again like the latest thing, using blend modes to composite. Control J. So you highlight the girl. Control J gives you a copy. I don't know if you saw my layer stack, but now I've got 2 pictures of the girl. I'm going to disable one and highlight or make active the one below it. And I'm going to again use a blend mode. And I'm going to use the same blend mode, screen. Now you see what's happened is the girl has blended in, but entirely too much. You know, the screen mode blended her face and everything else in. And that's why you have this layer on top. So let's activate it. Now we're going to hide it with the layer mask. Normally if you hit your layer mask icon down here, you get a white mask. That's the wrong layer, by the way, but you get a white mask. And the white mask won't do you any good in this situation. if you don't know, Control Z undoes the last step you did. If you want to go back in steps, you hit Control Alt Z, Control Alt Z, Control Alt Z, Control Alt Z, and it'll keep going all the way back. Okay, so we got this girl here. She's in screen mode, the middle layer. The top mode, we're going to add a black layer mask to. Now you can add your white layer mask and fill it with black, or you can just hold down the Alt key and press the mask icon again, and that produces a black mask. Now with a white brush, and you can see I've got black as my forward color, my chosen color. Hit the X key, and that swaps them. So I've got white now as the forward color, or the front color. And I hit B to go to brush. And now this really gets tricky. I hit Alt and my right mouse key, and I can increase or decrease my brush size by going left to right. And I can increase or decrease the softness by going up and down. And I'm going to go to about a 400 pixel brush that's relatively soft. I'm going to set my flow and opacity to 100%. And again, it's not working, but there it is. And then just start painting her back in. Now remember, you've got to have the mask selected over here. And as you paint white onto that mask, you're bringing back what was in that photo. And making her non-transparent again.
Will you go through that sequence again real quickly? I didn't get it all. Too much trouble? Okay.
Now let me finish up what I'm doing. By the way, and I do this 10 times a day, and I now know better. If you hit the Shift key and the right mouse button, you get this menu, which is basically the blend mode of the brush, overlay, spot, all that stuff. It's not what I was trying to do. I was trying to hold the Edit key and the Alt key and reduce the size of my brush and paint in here. Now, when I get over into the hairier, pardon the pun, areas of this composite, I would use a little softer brush. Mana 18 classes. Okay, so that's 0%, so that's pretty soft. And paint over. Now again, X swaps colors. I think I painted a little bit too much. Maybe not. Oh, you know what it is? My opacities. I'm going to kick the opacity of the brush down. That's at 30% now. By pressing the 3 key, the opacity has gone down to 30%. And I will just get white, my forward color, and just paint it back in. And again, with these areas, you just got to kind of finesse it. But basically, I forgot about the film the last time too. Okay, I've got to increase my opacity, so I'm going to go to 8, that's 80%. Ah, okay. Painted in black on a black mask. Wondering why that wasn't working.
I know that, Gary. Come on.
Yeah, well, you know what? It works perfect when I'm at home in my underwear by myself at my desk. When I'm in front of 100 people trying to act like I know what I'm doing is when this stuff doesn't work.
We just ate.
Yeah. Well, that's my official Photoshop, uniform is my boxers. Now, again, I don't know if you're aware of it, but when you're painting, you can click once, hold down the Shift key, click again, and you'll paint a straight line in between the two dots, and that applies to any situation where you're painting, whether it's on a mask or
Say that
whatever.
again.
You can click once, and then pick another spot, click again, holding down the shift key, and you'll fill in the space in between with a straight line from the first click to the last click. That makes it a lot easier, like when you're painting the edges on a mask, if you're trying to paint the edges of a cutout.
Right.
So anyway, without spending a lot of time finessing this, you see the result. You can see her hair. You can see through her hair. All the black is gone that she was originally against. All around the edges. And I should have positioned her differently. Let me show you on the original. I'm going to close this and then reopen the original because I saved it. But using that same technique, I did this one earlier. And again, all the flyaway hairs are still there. She didn't have the helmet head. You can even read the West 37th Street sign through her flyaway hair. So where did I lose you, hon?
It's okay. I'm so new at this. Don't go back.
Oh, okay. This is a little bit of an advanced technique, but I'm so excited about learning it that I had to show it off. Believe it or not, this picture, which is my screensaver picture, I use the same technique on to get all of this into the scene. Yeah, I'll go over it. To make it work with darker hair, I cut out the edge, the pieces that I wanted. I did a cutout like so. I converted it to black and white, used levels to give me a real big contrast between black and white, threw it in there, did screen mode, and then went back and painted it with the hair color. And I did get some paint in between her hairs, but then I used the blend option, blend if, in the layers panel, and blend if it wasn't white. Basically, because the background was white or in screen mode, it eliminated all the color in between the hairs. I'll show you that in the advanced class. But
Right.
the point is it will work with dark hair. It's just a little tougher, and you have to have a good picture.
So the
Okay.
purpose of, in my head, I just want to get this straight. So the purpose of the screen mode, the screen layer
Mhm.
underneath is really just to give you, while you're painting back in, to give you that layer that,
That's
so you can
that's
see what you're
what
painting.
that's what it is without the screen mode.
Right,
The screen mode is giving me all the flyaways, all the edges.
right. Right, so that's where you're getting all that.
Yeah.
And it also gives you a guideline for painting it back in.
Yeah.
You're able to see
Sure.
that as your, okay.
Absolutely. But like I said, in CS
Show
or
it without the screen mode up close like that.
in CS or Photoshop 7, that would have been impossible to do. In fact, it would have looked a lot like that. And like I said, this is like, the latest cutting edge thing that the Russians are teaching. The Russians are like the Mac Daddies nowadays when it comes to Photoshop, and that's where I learned it.
As opposed to the North Koreans.
Yeah, the North Koreans suck. If any of you guys ever want to have some fun, Google North Korean Photoshop. They're not real good at it. Anyway, you can use blend modes to composite your pictures. That's the coolest thing. You can't in every situation, but if you know how it works, or at least the theory of it, when you run across a situation where it works, you can get a better looking selection, and it'll make your life a lot easier. I'll give you one more example of the same thing, if I can find it. Yeah, this getting old stuff sucks, man. Not being able to see. Yeah, tell me about it.
Trifocals are hell.
Anyway, if you look at this guy and this girl, that was the technique that was used to lay her in there. She was originally cut out on a gray background. This is my first shot at doing it, so it isn't as good as I would have liked it to have been. I'll probably redo it someday.
So they weren't a couple.
No, they were a couple, but they were shot in a gray, against a
Okay.
gray background in the studio.
Okay.
And to get her hair in there, you know, I used that technique.
Okay, got it.
Got a couple more for you here.
I have a question.
Yes,
The one, you had a picture up there earlier of a motorcycle.
let's do that one.
Is that two pictures?
Yes,
Okay, it looks like they were just blended
yep,
in the middle.
yep.
How did you do that? I like that.
Layer mask. That's that's the final picture. So,
Is that red spot in the middle supposed to be
yeah, it is the sun reflecting off this part of the frame.
there? Okay.
Now I added it. Well, let me get rid of all the manipulation. You can select all your layers or any number of layers you want in your layer stack and hit Control G and create a group. You see what I did now? I've got all that in a group. So that's the original picture,
Okay.
and that's the original spot.
Oh.
All I did was enhance it some. The reason I wanted to show this was to talk about layer masks and teach layer masks, because this is a 2-picture composite using nothing but layer masks, or a layer mask. The second picture, of course, is the speedometer, and it's basically just laid in there. Well, you know what? Let me just do it from the start, and that way you guys can see how it's done. So, place embedded, and find the speedometer. This was another one that was just a stock image that was on Google, and of course I've trimmed it and everything else, which is why I got that weird white funky background. But I just moved it over to the side like so, and then did a layer mask on it. And I think I did just a white layer mask. Now, like what I was talking about, this is the same technique that I mentioned to create a gradual blur, but I'm not going to use it for blur. Use a black and white gradient right on the layer mask, and just paint across the layer mask, and you can see the parts that are white. You see the layer mask down here? The parts that are white will show, the parts that are black will hide. And it's really just a matter of playing with that gradient until you get it where you want it. And when I'm sitting around in my underwear, it works a lot better. Let me move this slightly. I'd have to charge extra for that.
Ain't nothing wrong with his ears.
There you go.
I told you I came to heckle you.
You know what? I brought a tutorial just for Tina. Just for Tina. You're going to love it. Okay, so here's my gradient tool. It's better. It's better.
There's nothing better than a baseball bat.
Oh, I bet you there is. Wait till you see. Anyways, that is the idea. And adjust so it works with your gradient. And if it doesn't, you can brush in. Hitting the D key, D like in David, puts these colors back to default, which is black and white. And remember, X brings white to the front. X again brings black to the front. So what I want to do is hide this part. So I'm going to click on the mask, making sure that's what I paint on. Hit B for my brush, and then get a big gigantic and soft brush. It's 2%. Just give it a couple clicks, and you see it kind of disappears. Now, in the original, and I'm going to explain everything I'm doing because I always get accused of talking too fast and not explaining. The mask and this layer, this speedometer picture, are locked together. Whenever you add a layer mask, it automatically, by default, locks to the picture you're masking. You can unlock it by just clicking on that chain link, and you can lock it by clicking on that chain link again. The reason that you want to unlock it is that using the Move tool, which is shortcut V, your keyboard shortcut is V, like in Victory, I can move the mask, or I could click on the picture and move the picture independently of the mask. And again, that's just a matter of getting it adjusted and how you want it. Yes, sir.
Can you, and tell me if this is a stupid way to do it, can you go to the motorcycle picture, use color select, and then set up a mask where you're you're revealing the motorcycle guy?
Yeah.
And then move it over to the other
Yeah,
one?
it's exactly the same thing, but the opposite, basically. And it really makes no difference. You may find that it's easier to do that. You may find it's not.
So you can move from a mask from one layer mask to move it to a different whole layer.
Well,
I guess
if
it
you
wouldn't matter. You could just do the opposite on that layer.
right, you could just add a mask here,
Yeah.
and then hit the gradient the opposite direction.
Okay.
Now, in the original composition, the bike was in black and white. So there's the bike. And I'm going to find the black and white adjustment layer, which is that one. Click on it, and you see now the bike is black and white. And the only thing that is in color, of course, is the speedometer arm. And then you can, play with layers and curves to adjust your brightness and stuff from there. Is that answering your question there, Maggie?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a motorcycle. You can use a mask with a gradient to blend anything together. It's just a matter of finding two things that will look right together. This is basically a tutorial that I think I learned it off of one of the Scott Kelby things 10, 15 years ago when I first started doing it. But I'm a biker kind of guy, so it was always one that I liked. Now, what I did do in the original, aside from using the lens flare filter on that guy, which I never really kind of decided whether I liked it or not, but to give it a sense of motion, I duplicated the motorcycle layer, and again, I made it active and hit Control J, so now I have two copies of it. The top copy, that is the speedometer layer. I did it with both layers, so just watch what happens. The top copy, I go to Blur, Motion Blur, and I want it to go from front to back, as if it's moving that way. That's way too extreme, so I'm going to back down on the amount of motion. And then, because, and I think I mentioned this, when you place a picture into another picture, it automatically becomes a smart object. That filter, that motion blur, is a smart filter, and it gives you its own layer mask. So now the same thing, just take your gradient tool, going from black to white. Yeah, I'm on the smart object, and Photoshop is telling me you dummy. So you go to the mask, and then using that gradient. Yeah, that was too much. I turned it all black. Control Z, I'm undoing. So here's the problem. See my colors? They're black and black. And I don't know how that happened, but if I hit D for default, it goes back to black and white. Yeah, see what I'm saying? What's happening now? as that mask builds up towards the edge, I get motion to the here and not to here. And if that's not enough for me, I can take the opacity of that layer and kick it down to even reduce it more. It's not quite as important, at least in my eyes, on the speedometer as it is on the Harley. So now again, Control J, I'm going to make a copy of the Harley, and I am going to do the same thing. Filter, blur, motion blur. Now I'm going to keep the angle the same so it matches the motion blur on the speedometer. Crank it down just a little bit. Mask that layer. Now this, again, has a smart filter with the mask. So I take the gradient tool. Man, I'm going blind. And make sure I'm on the mask, and then do a gradient in the opposite direction. That's about right. And then, again, just crank down the opacity of that filter layer. Now the only other thing, which I just am seeing now, is you know what, I'm going to take, and this is a good use for the group, I'm going to take and group together my two speedometer pictures. I've highlighted both speedometers, layers. I'm going to Control G, and now I've got a group that is just the speedometers. I'm going to put a layer mask on it. I don't know if you guys can see it, but right in here there's a line where the two pictures come together, and I've got this mask. So now I'm going to hit my brush, and I'm going to go to black by hitting the X key, and then just hide that line. So basically I've masked the group and hidden that line that separated the two pictures. So now I've got blur to the right on the speedometer, blur to the left on the guy's butt and feet, and both my pictures blended together. Any questions? Okay. Looks like we're not going to have time to do them all tonight, but we're going to do my favorite one, the one I brought especially for Tina.
Which means you'll all have to go to Gary's workshop.
There you go. I call this one
I will be.
I call this one Girly Man, because there are some guys that are unfortunately not as endowed as I am by the good Lord with the physique, and don't let that discourage you. If you take pictures of them, you can give them a physique. This is meant to teach you not only layers but blend modes. So you get a guy with a desirable physique, a guy kind of like me. And let's say this guy. His stomach, chest, just him and I could be the same, could be like brothers. So the first thing you want to do is unlock it so it's not a background layer anymore, so you can do all kinds of stuff to go to image, adjustment to make it a black and white. And actually, you know what, I'm going to just desaturate it all together, which is Control-Shift-U. For some reason, that's not a shortcut I use a lot. Hit your lasso tool and make a selection around the part of the picture that we want to use. Doesn't have to be exact, it can just be a rough selection. And since Adam seems to be missing in the chest and ab department, that's the part we're going to use.
You are so wrong.
We're going to hit Control J and put that part of that gentleman's body on its own layer. And it looks a little dark to me, so I'm going to give it a levels adjustment and see if I can brighten it up some. Okay, and then I'm going to right click and merge that down, because I'm going to carry this part of this guy into the other picture, and I don't want to take the adjustment layer with me. So I've merged the adjustment layer down into that. Hit the V key for your your move tool. Hover over the tab up here for that picture. If you hit the Shift key when you're placing another picture in, it throws it right in the middle. So the way I do this is to reduce the opacity way down so that I can line it up. And then, by the way, hitting the shift key while you're moving these handles in the corners keeps the picture at the same perspective. If you don't, it can go wonky on you and stuff. If you hit the shift key, it'll keep it at the original perspective. But anyway, in this scenario, I try and line up the nipples and the belly button. Well, just so it kind of looks like it belongs there. Even though Adam is a girly man, he does have nipples and a belly button. So I'm going to make him look just as fit and healthy as I am. Okay, so I've got that placed where I want it, and now I'm going to use the overlay blend mode, which will get rid of all that gray and basically just give me the contrast. It does mess with the color some because, of course, Adam is a pasty skin kind of guy. But you can play with it and adjust it. And then, again, use a layer mask. So I'm going to commit to that transformation. Put a layer mask on his new abs. Get my B for brush, paint it black, and just cut away the sharp edges, like so. Just using a soft brush. One of the things with Photoshop, in terms of, one of the great secrets of Photoshop, to doing good Photoshop, is to make it subtle. This is kind of already subtle, but when you're working on your composites, it's something that you definitely want to consider is, is it obviously Photoshop? I could make this a lot more obvious than it is, but again, subtlety goes a long way in selling the fake. To make the muscles stand out a little bit more, I'll give it a curves adjustment. Give it a little bit more contrast. You can see like the stomach and chest are coming out a little bit more, and I will clip it to the stomach layer. So there's part of it. I got to get rid of this line up here too, around his spindly little neck.
You're so jealous.
Oh yeah, right.
Thank you. That's what I tell them.
Oh yeah, right.
It's always hating them.
Okay, so this is the trick I was talking about later. I'm hit earlier at the Alt, Control, Shift, E. And now I've created one single layer all the way at the top that is a flattening of all the layers below. And then, because he's so pathetic, you go into Filter, Liquify, and you pick out the bloat tool, because that's what we want to do. We want to make his muscles bloat a little bit. And give him a couple flicks right here, so he gets some pecs. Can't get down to the crotch and click it, but
That's a different meeting.
different seminar.
Different seminar.
That's the underwear seminar.
So we do his little girly shoulders a little bit.
Curly shoulders.
Give him a little bit of a, give him the
It
incredible,
doesn't work on real people.
give him the incredible Hulk.
It does work, it's just that you have to reapply it every time you take a new picture.
Gotcha.
We'll give him some biceps.
Oh my God. He doesn't need biceps. He does not need any work.
Give him some forearm.
Adam will be lead singer maroon back.
Him and his husband are very happy together. Okay, so I'm going to commit that. You can see he's gotten a lot more manly. Just to show you what I was talking about earlier, I'll hit it with a gradient map. And right now it's a black and white gradient. I don't know why, like I said, I tend to use this one a lot, but soften it up a little bit, make it more blue and less purple. And of course, you can kind of leave it like that and call it art, or get your opacity, actually go to color. The color mode takes it down quite a bit, and then take your opacity and kick it way down. And again, that just kind of ties everything together a little bit better. And just to show you, it is a subtle difference. And another keyboard shortcut to learn, if you hold down your Alt key and click this little eyeball, you show only the layer that you clicked on. Click it again, you show the whole, all the layers.
Hold the Alt key.
Yeah,
while
and click
clicking
on the eyeball.
eyeball.
So,
Switch between before and after again.
yep, that's Girly Man Adam. This is where hit to pump you up, Adam.
You're awful.
Hey, I did it just for you.
I'm sure you did.
Barry, how long did you practice on that? Your trousers in the living room by yourself with your cat?
About 15 minutes.
That's your story, right?
There you go.
That's more than 3 minutes. Oh, never mind.
Okay, you guys done, or you want to do one more?
You got a fast one?
Got a cool one. It's not necessarily fast. No, I
Yeah.
meant to I wanted to show you guys Pixel Squid. He connected to the internet.
Hey, Gary, it's already 8 minutes.
Oh, that
Yeah,
one.
we got till 9, and we just got to announce winners, right?
Yeah, we got the draw. We got an announcement.
What about the one where you had the person looked like part of it was disintegrating?
That's a little bit advanced.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so run a Google search for black hole. You pull up this. I've got some custom brushes that I've made. I'm like a brush fanatic now. So this is like a quasar kind of thing. And I'm going to pick a yellow or orange kind of color here.
Make sure you aren't trying to sell these pictures you make and put other people's stuff on the internet. It is copyright infringement.
Yeah.
Even if they're stock?
Well, if you pay for
Unless
the
you buy the
stock.
stock.
Yeah,
Which
if
I-
you buy it with the right license, then yes.
Yeah, which I didn't.
Which
Um,
lens did you use for the X-Wing fighter when you were taking that picture?
So I give it a couple hits with the quasar looking brush there and the yellow, and go to let's try vivid light. Yeah, there you go. Now, and this is where your Pixel Squid comes in. When you download and install Pixel Squid, you get this little panel here. And in my other class, I'm going to talk about all these panels here because it's some really cool stuff. But that's the Pixel Squid panel. And hopefully I'm signed in because I'm on the internet. Yeah, there you go. These are all items that I've downloaded from Pixel Squid, and I've either used them in previous composites or downloaded them today. So let's take the blowed up Death Star.
And all of those are okay to use to sell.
Yeah, they're 3D items. And this is what I was talking about before. So you can position them any way you want inside that little panel. And when you click off of it, it positions itself to match inside your composite. You can also use a high resolution version of it, which I just did by clicking on that. And it's downloading to high resolution. Boom, there it is. And I'm going to get out. So I'm going to reduce the size of the half blowed up Death Star. Put it back behind the quasar light there. Commit to it. Go back to Pixel Squid. Get me some. Yes, sir.
Did I understand you correctly that you can rotate the
Yes.
item? Can you also rotate top to bottom
Yep.
axis?
You can move it any way you want. It's easier to see on something like this than on something that's round. But there's my X-Wing fighter, and in the Pixel Squid panel, I don't know if you guys can see it on the TV or not, but
Yeah,
you can see all the different positions I can get out of it. So I want it to look like
Can
it's,
you light it within that?
no. Now on a normal 3D object that you would use in Photoshop, you can. But these guys you can't. Like I said, they come with a shadow, and a lot of times you've got to mask out and paint out the shadow, depending on your composition. In this case, we won't have to. So I've got it where I wanted it. I hit the high resolution, it's downloaded, there it is. Now with Pixel Squid, you can also do the positioning on their website and download a PSD and then just drag it into your composite. If your computer maybe isn't as fast, you know, it might be something to do. I like being able to look at the composition while I'm working on it, and being able to go back and change it too, have second thoughts about it. You can do that in Pixel Squid as long as you have the panel installed. So rather than do another one, I'm just going to Control J, duplicating that layer once I commit to it.
When you say commit to it, what do you mean?
Well, you press the OK button and
Okay.
hit Enter.
Alright.
So Control J, now I've got two X-Wing fighters. You can see where the other one is. So I'm just going to take and transform it and flip it horizontally. So it's coming in from the other direction. Oops, wrong layer. Bring him in from there and maybe give him a little bit more of an angle. Again, commit to it by hitting a little check mark there. He's got a little bit more of an angle. And as you can see, these two guys just came in from outer space on the Death Star. Now I'm going to do one more thing because I'm going to throw an effect on it. But I've just made a blank layer. Clicking this little guy down here gives you a blank layer. I'm going to go get a paintbrush, and I'm going to get, let's say this guy, kind of like a particle brush. Open it way up. Yeah, that might be too much. Yeah, that's definitely going to be too much. That's not the brush that I normally would use. Now I'm rushed. Let's try this one. I'll use that one, but I want to do it in white. So now, with my basically blur selected, I go to filter, blur, go to radial blur. With radial blur, you can make things spin, you can make them zoom towards the center. I'm going to hit zoom, and I'm going to crank up the amount. Hit 45. Yeah, it needs more than that, doesn't it? Hang on one second. I want to undo. If I'd done a smart object, I wouldn't have to undo. But blur, radial blur, say 77, much better. Use the opacity way down, just to add a little bit of a sense of motion. I'm going to merge these two X-Wings together. Oops. Had to merge down. It's not going to let me. I mean, yeah, select both of them. Merge layers. So now I've got both X-Wings on one layer. And I'm going to hit them with the same filter, but nowhere near as intense. Blur, radial blur. That one back down to like 10. I'll try 15. A little too much. new, and I'm skipping a step. Actually, I want to duplicate that layer, Control J. Now I've got 2 layers of X-wings. And I'm going to redo that same radial blur. Put a mask on the one that's blurred. I've been working under pressure. The mask is white, so I'm going to take black, get my brush, go to a normal brush, yeah, 0%, at 80%. So I've got a little bit of a motion blur on the edge of the X-wing. And this guy can come down even a little bit more, maybe.
Nice.
I think in the original one, I actually did one, and that's why, again, if I wasn't rushing, I'd find the right brush and do a black layer with those stars, and then do the radial blur on the stars, like you see in the window of the fighters in Star Wars as you're going, you know, the stars that have trails. But anyway, that kind of gives you an idea of how that composition got put together using 3D objects out of Pixel Squid. You can get 3D objects from a number of different sites, but those are true Photoshop 3D items, which will give you the advantages that Steve's talking about, where you can individually light them and have a lot better control of the light and all. But they're much more difficult to work with. The 3D panel in Photoshop can be challenging if you've not used it before. So before we say to hell with this, has anyone got any other questions?
Pixel Squid, how much is that?
It is free,
Oh,
which is the best part about it. And if you go to it, like I said, the amount of stuff that they've got on there, this, you know, most people say, well, I would never use it. The stuff they've got on there is insane. Fountain pens. You know, I did a picture of the girl the other day shooting an arrow. Well, the arrow she had was a field point arrow. So I ran a Pixel Squid search for arrow, and it came up with broadhead. So I just downloaded an arrow, brought it down to size, laid it in the picture where the field point was. Now she's shooting the broadhead. Like I said, their library of stuff is just insane. A lot of it is geared towards industrial stuff. So you'll see, like, you know, construction equipment, medical equipment, you know, that type of junk. But they're obviously Star Wars fans. There's tons of Star Wars stuff. A lot of Ferraris and race cars and that kind of stuff. A bunch of boats. You saw there was a GoPro camera. The ones I've used a lot, for example, are like the Splash. You know, the composite that I had flipping up there, the Martini glass with the Splash. And this is, you know, the interface that you would use on the website. You know, you can position it like you want it right on the website, and then download a PSD or download a PNG file of it.
And when you download it, it's going to be stationary. Yeah.
Right. Or you can choose the add to Photoshop option, but you have to have that Pixel Squid panel installed to use that. Which I've found no reason not to use it. It doesn't slow down performance or anything else. So those are some very basic composites and some very basic techniques to have fun with your pictures. Those techniques can be used on, you know, any number of pictures. It doesn't have to be a bike and a speedometer, you know, it can be butterflies and flowers. But you can blend them together artistically using that mask or using a blend mode. No other questions?
Good.
Okay.